So for the past year, kind of off and on, I've been experimenting with sending 1V oct to Euro accents using CircuitPython. And I think I'm finally at the point where I can take those experiments and combine them into kind of a final project. 2 years ago, I worked on this project, the MIDI Melody Maker with Neruez for Adafruit. And what it does is it outputs these different MIDI note patterns in different pitches, and you can control all of that. There's like 6 different modes. I was really proud of it. When I tried to use it with my Eurorack setup, that's kind of like why I built it, I realized that for the style in which I like to patch, integrating MIDI was not what I was looking for. However, I still wanted that functionality that was in the MIDI Melody Maker. I wanted to be able to generate patterns and pitches and also have like really discrete control over what key I was in. So what I realized was I wanted that MIDI Melody Maker functionality, but I wanted it to be all CV. I didn't want to have to be bringing in MIDI. Which brings me to this idea. Definitely still an idea, it's still cooking, all subject to change, but I think a decent starting point. First, an analog dial gauge. Why? Well, it's both functional and aesthetic, which is my favorite combo. Recently I've seen some boutique synths and effects with gauges like this, most notably the Matuka FM by Arthur Joly. The idea would be that I could see the voltages going out on the dial and it could adjust to show each channel discretely with a switch or something. The brains would be a Raspberry Pi Pico. It runs CircuitPython, it has a lot of I/O flexibility, and it has castellated pads, which is important because I'm envisioning this project involving a custom PCB. Then an ADC and a DAC. Although I'm thinking of a custom PCB, I'm not sure that I want to go full custom. I think I still want to use some breakout boards for now. These stemma boards, the ADC and the DAC, have 4 channels each, so I can do 4 inputs to the ADC for quantizing and 4 outputs from the DAC for 1V oct, essentially taking an untuned wild CV waveform and outputting quantized waveforms. Gate input is definite, probably 4 inputs, and they'd pair with the 4 DAC outputs as triggers for patterns. How to input the note data? I mulled this over for a while. At first I considered MX switches. This has been increasingly common. Ones that have caught my eye are Busy Circuit's ASQ1 module, Denki Auto's OMX27, and the as of yet unreleased and mysterious Chompy Club. It's just so cute. I mean, come on. But then Adafruit got these step switches into the shop, and I mean, they're classic. They have an LED for indication, and the footprint's a little easier than MX Key in this application, I think, as far as spacing. Folks have already done some fun designs with them, notably Toddbot's Pico sequencer, which could be considered a cousin of the idea cooking here. I'd use 12 of these switches, 1 for each note, and I'd do a piano layout taking advantage of the fact that they come in black and white colorways. A screen will be helpful. It can help to navigate modes, show info, basically tell me what's going on. Rather than having kind of esoteric interpretations. How to navigate these modes, these menus. I'm thinking rotary switches for some applications, but an encoder will make menu navigation easier from a software perspective. So, there may be multiple dials, there may be one, who knows. I think probably one of the greatest examples of UI navigation with a single switch is Pamela's new workout, another Busy Circuit module. There's so much functionality in there, and you're only using one rotary encoder. I think it's a really great example of what can be done with menus. And another reason why I think a screen just helps. It just takes away that mystery. And then the Pico has a lot of pins, but probably not enough, so maybe a GPIO expander. I'm fond of the AW9523, and I used it on the MIDI Fighter project that we did, also with the Pico. It's also a constant current LED driver, so that could make for some fun LED effects. And that could mean that I take the LEDs from the step switches, route it to that, and then use the onboard GPIO from the Pico for the actual switches. A few months ago, I coded up a proof of concept using CircuitPython for this idea. I used a macro pad, the ADC, and a DAC after an evening of couch prototyping with my cat Harriet while we watched Tuca and Birdie. Came together surprisingly well, and in this demo you can see I'm doing a single input and output. I'm selecting the notes with the keys on the macro pad, and depending on what key is pressed, those are the only notes being output from that incoming waveform. Basically, the ADC reads the voltage value of the incoming CV signal, and then whatever voltage it's closest to that matches with a note value for 1V oct is what it's mapped to and outputted through the DAC. So the idea is that I would have 4 of those inputs going into the ADC, 4 of those outputs coming out of the DAC. Each of those could have different notes assigned to them or patterns, so that it would kind of create this kind of polyphonic tool to be used with Eurorack. And because they'd be originating from the same source, they would all be in tune with each other, assuming of course that the oscillators are also in tune. They would be in sync with each other as far as clock. It would make a really more of a cohesive experience from an end user perspective. And this is important because in my experience at least, with the modules that I've been fortunate to use, quantizers or arpeggiators, things like that, they tend to be one input, one output. If they do have multiple outputs to 1V oct, you're still only sending one melody type. So this idea of having 4 inputs, 4 outputs with different melodies and things I can assign to each channel, that's kind of a big deal. So that's why I'm pursuing this project and why I started looking into 1V oct and Circuit Python in general. So I'm viewing this project as big and long-term as I did with the robot xylophone. That means I'm going to be taking my time with it. I'll be documenting it here because I've been letting this idea kind of marinate for the past year. And I did that so that I would make informed decisions on the hardware, the software, and everything I was approaching. And like I even mentioned, like I was considering MX keys, but then like, you know, these switches will be better for it. So that's kind of the approach I'll be taking, but that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this has been Blitz City DIY.